Hey, good afternoon or good morning to those of you that might be on the West Coast or an alternative time zone. Today is going to be another live session here with Recruit Military. My name is Chris Newsome. I'm going to be your spouse. On these live sessions, we this is a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil spouse employment, and whatever else we can come up with that's impacting the military community. So joining me today, we have Miss Olivia Nunn, and today's topic we're going to go through resilient transitioning. So if you're not familiar with Olivia, she's recently retired Army officer with a long and successful career, starting in the Chemical Corps and finishing off as the communications director for U.S. Army Soldier for Life. So if you haven't seen her, you have seen her content. I can almost guarantee you that. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Olivia Nunn. Olivia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much, Chris, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you and your audience. It's always a good day spending
Absolutely.
time with you. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's we're a blast from the past. We've been able to work together over the last few years. It's interesting to be on the other side of the gate at this point. Very recently retired. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just fill in our listeners on just a little bit of your bio as far as your Army journey.
Yeah, so I retired just a little over 20 years, like 20 years and a couple of months. And I started off as a chemical officer. I did that for 10 years. And as a chemical officer, I did 3 tours to Iraq and I had a great time, if you could say that. I had the opportunity to spend most of my time in an operational capacity as a chemical officer in an armor unit. So I served in 4th Infantry Division and 1st Cav. So what does that tell you? Fort Hood, Texas. Heavy units, and I had the opportunity to do things that probably most chemical officers didn't get to do. Yes, I still did the unit status report. In fact, we just talked about that in the green room, but that afforded me the opportunity to really see the battlefield in a very different way. I hit the road. I was the first female to command the brigade HHT troop for 1st Brigade, 1st Cav. And that kind of gave me an understanding of operations in a way that I never imagined. And I truly appreciated the lessons that I learned from that. And then that gave me such an appreciation for the next phase of my life in the Army. The next 10 years I spent as a storyteller, as a communicator. And that means being a public affairs officer for the Army. And I went strategic. So I went to West Point. And from there, that took me to grad school. The Army said, hey, not only did you do a great job at West Point, where I started off as being the social media chief, and I won some awards and accolades for West Point, opened up. This is when the Army decided, hey, you can be on social media for the first time. So we started opening up social media accounts, started working in the DEI space, diversity, inclusion, and equity. That became a big thing. Women empowerment, that really became a huge landscape for me. I was an assistant triathlon coach while I was at West Point. Got to do a lot of great things. And then that transitioned me into the DC area. So the Army said, we're going to send you to grad school. You're going to go to Georgetown. We're going to sharpen your tools as a communicator. And then they said, hey, because you did that, we're going to send you to the 5-sided building. And there I worked at U.S. Army Public Affairs at the Pentagon. And I got to sit on some great teams and I helped the Army write some key strategic public pieces that mattered to the Army. Everything from women in combat, to sit on key pieces of history where it mattered for the military. That just to be able to pen some parts of that was really cool. Religious accommodation, military working dog. I mean, all of those things was, while it doesn't say, at that time I was a major, Major Olivia Nunn were all those pieces, there were parts of it that I got to write in. And I was a lead communications planner for that. I was also an executive officer for that time. He's now retired, Malcolm Frost. So, got to do some cool things. And then the Army said, hey, you had such a great time doing that. we're going to send you to a program called U.S. Army Soldier for Life. And that's kind of where I started working with RecruitMilitary. And I served as the lead communications officer for that organization. And that sent me literally all around the world, where we got to interface with organizations about what we do for the military and how do we interface that back to not only to corporate, but back to the military. How do we merge those two areas, everything from recruitment to employment to health and wellness to education? And that has taken me on a journey that has, shaped what I do now beyond my time in uniform.
Well, you've worn more hats than most, but it. I think it's very telling of who you are and the caliber of individual that you are to watch that trajectory and to see your last duty station, so to speak, as the comms director for Soldier for Life. Nobody better qualified than yourself. So, within that capacity, when you're talking all things Army, all things transition at that point as well, because Soldier for Life, there's a focus not just on those men and women that are transitioning right now, but also those have already transitioned. Myself, I would be an example. I am a Soldier for Life, but I transitioned 15 years ago. So when you're creating all of this content and these best practices, it's first and foremost very cool that you get to have such a direct hand and in the guidance or the content and information that's bestowed to these men and women as they're transitioning. But to get granular on some of those topics, because when we think transition, I think everybody's got a different perspective. And for those that are going through it now or about to go through it, there might be some trepidation or hesitation. They're doing something that they haven't done before. They're stepping into the great unknown. So if we could, I'd love to, considering how recently you've transitioned, relative to somebody like myself, I wouldn't have the advice because it's outdated at best. But when we're talking transition classes and seminars, we tend to spend a lot of time discussing, financial planning, job searching, interview prep, a great deal of relevant topics. Do you feel that within the classroom that we're spending enough time addressing like the cultural and mental transition that a lot of these men and women go through, because you're kind of getting that safety rug, I don't want to say yanked out from underneath you, but you're being nudged out there into the great unknown. Are we talking enough about culture and that that headspace that one needs in order to successfully transition?
I don't think we do. And I think the reason why we don't is, how do you teach something that you have to feel, right? Um, and I've shared this before. So I spent 3 years at Soldier for Life, and I've talked about it. I've talked about it in the podcast because I also was the podcast host and director for U.S. Army Soldier for Life. And there was 9 seasons, and I hosted from season 3 to 9. And in fact, if you haven't heard about that podcast series, I encourage you to go find it. It's on all of the major players out there. Go listen to it. It's all kinds of good nuggets of information. And I talk about all the information that came back to Soldier for Life, right? We talk about go find your tribe, go find and give back to the communities that are out there. There's many ways in which you can serve even beyond your uniform. And in that, we talk about, yes, SFL TAP is going to, which is now Army TAP, is going to equip you with the tools on how to build your resume, how to wear your business suit correctly, how to go walk into an interview and feel confident, how to get the right skills that you're going to need for the next job. All great things. Continue to do those things. But what we don't necessarily talk about is, where's your head and your heart? Where's your mental and your spiritual and emotional well-being after you transition? And I think, or even as you're transitioning, and I think where it really hit hard for me is the day that I was going through my retirement ceremony. It was at the end of August. My retirement date was 1 September. And I think why it hit really hard for me was that was the same day that America was receiving the 13 fallen service members from Afghanistan, right? The suicide bomb event had happened at Kabul on the airfield, and we lost 13 service members. And America was receiving the fallen. And here I was, because I was retiring in the DC area at Fort Myer, Henderson Hall, it's a big pomp and circumstance, right? They bring out Pershing's band, this beautiful ceremony, and almost everybody I'm retiring with is 05 and above, and Master Sergeant and above for the most part. And we're all senior, and I'm sitting around like, wow, this is pretty cool. And at the same time, there's families that are burying their loved ones. And so I thought, maybe I can retract my retirement. Maybe, maybe I should retract and maybe we should go over there and bring hellfire, right? And then but what it made me realize is the emotional and the mental piece of, I really haven't sat with, am I ready to let it go? Because the 2 years preparing, because we talked about it in the whole TAP transition of 24 months out, you need to prepare to leave. And I kept saying, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And I did what we're supposed to do, right? I did all the planning and all of that. And I did all of this. I checked the blocks, I did check this, check that. And I was doing all the right things, but I didn't check the block about where my heart was. And it was in that moment that I finally got to sit with where my heart was. And so that is what I'm going to leave with the listeners is, you need to make sure that as you're checking the block of where your skill set is, are you writing your resume? Are you doing, the skill set preparation to go to college or anything else that you're doing? Where is your heart? Where's your head at? Because it's going to matter.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. We, servicemen and women go from serving with extreme purpose to all of a sudden, there's a reacclimation, if you will, to civilian life. But it's a massive cultural shock. And I speak for myself on this one. When I transitioned out initially, I went through the same motions. There was a lot of block checking. You have to go through those very tactical items on your punch list so that you can get that stamp and clear post. But it's really only at that point that you get that stamp, and you're, whether you're in the car or on a plane headed back to the home of record, or just going back home taking off that uniform for the last time, that the reality sets in, that a chapter in your life is over, and what are you going to do next? And what I know a lot of people tend to struggle with is finding a way to kind of replicate that purpose that they served with. You go from, let's say something, going from deployment or going from a combat arms MOS or anything for that matter to a regular 9 to 5. It can be deflating in some instances. It's hard to bring back that sense of camaraderie, the friends that you've made along the way, the friends that you don't have other friends like them, because you only, you have the strength of that relationship is because of the experiences that you've shared together. So I'm curious, I know that it's been 5 minutes basically since you took off the uniform, but during your transition now, are you able to, I don't want to say it's inherently a void, but are you able to put other elements back into your life that would kind of stand in the place of some of the value that you derived from your military service?
I think I lucked out in some of that aspect because I am a government contractor. So I'm kind of doing a lot of things, right? So after I left service, I became a government contractor. It's not what I thought I was going to do, right? In fact, I was like, I'm never going to be a government contractor.
Never
But
going anywhere near the government again.
exactly. But the opportunity arose, and it was, at the time it made sense. So I am a government contractor. I'm a senior marketing manager for a small company called S2 Analytical Solutions. And my client is National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA. And I work with a great team of individuals. And for me, almost everybody on the team has some kind of military connection. They have served in some way, or they were a spouse. So the language, the tribe, the mentality, I feel like I haven't really left.
Yeah, still there.
And not only that, like, I think if you really know me, I tend to use a lot of 4-letter words. And I feel like at work, and I work remotely. And so, it's funny when we do, and we do a lot of typing, we do a lot of, Zoom calls and stuff, actually WebEx. we tend to use a lot of same language. And so I'm like, so I feel like I'm at home in terms of the mentality. The part that's slightly different is I came from an operational world, right? Where I said I spent a lot of heavy time with, operators, and NGAs is part of the IC, the intelligence community, slightly different. So to me, they're a little weird, and I like to give them crap about that all the time. I like to remind them, like, you guys aren't operators, just so you know.
And you can still dress them down in acronyms and use them in military.
Oh,
The
and their
very thing
acronyms
that
are completely different. So that's where they get me. They love to tell me different acronyms, and I look at them like, "What you talking about, Willis?"
I know acronyms, but I don't know those acronyms.
Exactly. So, but we have fun. So I think I lucked out in that aspect.
Good, good.
But and then I think with the other part that I learned is that, at the same time, I went into the dating scene too, right? And part of the thing that you learn is, finding tribes, right? And I think I quickly learned is that you also have to find tribes in your personal life. And that was the one thing I learned is that um in the dating scene, like for me, I realized that you had to have a military background because of
Mm.
that connection. Like it didn't work for me if you had no idea where I was coming from, especially I think as a woman. I can't speak for a guy that is willing to date outside the military, but for me, like I think that was an intimidation factor. Here I am 20 years in the military and you're not. Like I didn't even know how to connect with somebody who didn't have a military background. So, you know,
It could certainly unearth some insecurities, I would imagine, to some of
especially
the
when I said, I've been to Iraq 3 times, right?
yeah, yeah.
So for me, I think I really lucked out. And then also I'm in the DC area. Like it is very hard to swing a stick in this area and not be somehow connected to the military in some way,
Right.
whether they're connected by defense contracting or the military. So for me, it was relatively easy to stay connected. So I feel blessed in that aspect. But at the end of the day, the part that I think I still am missing that I had to really dig into is that service piece, right? Being connected in that whole, I am connected to something bigger than myself. And here's how I stayed connected, and that is my business. So I started an LLC this past summer, and it's Olivia Nunn Communications LLC. And in that capacity, I started a podcast. And I am the podcast host and director for MOA, Military Officers Association of America. Very similar to what I did for Soldier for Life, but the uniform's off. So I get to hit harder. I get to talk a little grittier. And we're going to talk about policy. Like I didn't get to talk about that before, right? And I get to do that now. And with that, I can do that connection piece of giving back. On top of that, I also just recently ran in a pageant. I'm
A
currently title
pageant.
holder. Yeah. So I'm
Great
currently
deal.
the title holder for a Ms. Georgetown, and I was competing to be Ms. District of Columbia to go to the national level.
No
And
kidding.
my platform was about mental health, for military mental health, because I have my own journey and my own story about mental health, about why I think it's important and why we have a lack of resource in the military community about mental health, about breaking the silence of mental health, breaking the stigma of it's okay to not be okay, and everything that goes behind that. And all of that to say that my heart remains with the military community. And so that was my way of giving back, of believing and staying connected to something that's bigger than me. And that's what I would urge the listeners is that you have to find your way of somehow giving back. That's your tribe, right? Whether that's, staying connected to organizations that's about military mental health, or that's about, PTSD, or that's about, fill in the blank, but do something. There's so many great organizations that are out there, and I was blessed to meet so many of them when I was working at Soldier for Life. And I think a lot of times we're in such a rush to leave out of service, right? Whether you serve for 5 years or for 20, 25 years, we get to that point where like, I'm so done, I want to get out. And it isn't until you actually take a step back that you take an inventory, that you realized, hey, I didn't take a complete inventory of the things that I should have done, besides the whole, did I do a resume? Now I got a job. Yes, those are still important, right? But the complete inventory is that, are you now doing the things to satisfy all the complete parts of you, which is the social, emotional, mental well-being of yourself.
Yeah. And, I think I know everybody's journey is a little bit different. But I think that's a common thread. You go from serving with extreme purpose. You don't necessarily have the luxury of time to unpack all of the experiences that you've had, the pros, the cons. I can tell you, because again, your separation date was 1 September. Mine was a lifetime ago. It feels like you tend to have, almost a case of amnesia. You forget about the hardships, and you hold on to the good stuff that was there, and that's the right way to remember and to reflect upon your military experience. We certainly encourage everybody to find that bigger purpose. And for us here at Recruit Military, our focus is employment. We're an employment connector, and what we find is the people that have the most healthy transition, once they've got the holistic, the wraparound support that they need, because it's not just about a job. There's a lot more to transition than one given topic or vertical. But when you can do that soul searching and find something that allows you to continue to serve, in some cases, again, whether it be literal community service, or being able to derive that value and that impact, that purpose from your career, your next career. Find something that you can get behind, a mission, that is. A lot of people go out and they try to chase down the biggest paycheck or the most popular, recognized brand to work for. But at the end of the day, you need to have something that gives you that purpose, because that will be, I don't want to say it's going to be a void. We all derive purpose from different things, kids, your loved ones, whatever the case might be. But strongly encourage you to find what gets you jazzed. What gets you out of bed in the morning, what makes you excited to face the day. And it sounds like you've got a lot of different things. From being a chemical specialist to a communications director to now a pageant participant. You're about as well rounded as they make them. So hats off to you.
Oh, thanks.
As we're winding it down here, you know, and I don't want to ask you to say the same thing you just said, because I know that when you're talking about, advice that you have, clear your headspace, make sure that you've got that sound mind, body, and soul when you're going through transition. If you had any advice to give anybody, whether they be going through the transition right now, or maybe, it's somebody like myself who's been out for a few years, what's the best advice that you would give to somebody, that's just wearing that I'm a veteran, or I'm a soon to be veteran badge?
I think the biggest thing is that we get so locked up in the as we're transitioning, and I did it too, even though I was told this and I was in the business of doing this for the Army for 3 years. We get so locked up into we have to find the perfect job when we're leaving, right? And I'm going to zero in on this because this is Recruit Military, and you're in the business of finding a job. We get so fixated on we have to land this perfect job when we leave the military. And so we get so stressed out about the size of the salary, the location, the name of the company, and all of that, that we lose sight of so many other factors in that game. And I would say take the stress off of that. And one of the things that I learned from Kate Spinzanola, that works with Department of Veteran Service here in the state of Virginia, is that you have to make a non-negotiable list. And that is your list that is for you. And that list needs to be racked and stacked about what are the things that you yourself is important, right? And you rack and stack. What is the number one thing? Is it location? Is it salary? Is it working from home? All these things. And it's called non-negotiable, things that you will not bend on. And as you go down the list, you're willing to maybe bend a little bit more or move it around. And as you start looking at the companies that are out there and the offers that are coming in, you start comparing those things to this list. And then the last part is what you need to realize is that job that you take, just realize that you're not going to stay in that job. This isn't the job that the Army gave you or the Navy gave you that you're stuck with for the next 3 years. You are free to move about the cabin space, if you will, right? If you're a frequent flyer, you
And they
can,
do.
and
18 months is about
right,
the
and even
average
a
for that
year,
first
and it's
gig.
completely normal. And that was, and I, like I said, I heard that, but for some reason it didn't sink in until about after being on the job for about 6 months. Then I finally, it really clicked. I'm like, I don't have to stay here. And it was such a freeing moment for me to realize that I can actually leave. Like there's I don't have any loyalty to this company. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like the company's been great to me. I do like what I'm doing, but I don't have to stay here. I
It's a
can,
choice at this point.
it's a choice, right? I can continuously look. My skill sets are, I'm continuously building on my skill set, and there are other companies that are still looking and offering. And so when you realize that, when that really, really clicks, that takes the pressure off of yourself. And then you can really start looking at your non negotiable list and kind of reworking how you want to rack and stack that. And then the reason why I say that is that most people, when they create that list, they stack salary for the most part on the top because they think that that salary is so important. And they tend to put away the other things that aren't as important to them. And then but what you end up realizing is as you go through that job, salary actually wasn't the most important. It was those other things that actually are more important. Because the truth is, if you really think about it, why were you leaving the military to begin with? The pay was never the real reason why you left the military. You left the military for a reason, right? Maybe it was the lack of flexibility to be with your family. Maybe it was because you're tired of constantly being gone. Maybe it's because you wanted people to actually know your name when you came to the bar. If you think of Cheers, right? Maybe I'm kind of dating myself there with my age, but whatever that reason may be, right? For me, it's I'm an older mom because I chased my career. I never wanted the army to tell me that I had to leave my kids and have to go again to a combat zone. That's exactly why I said it was time for me to hang up my boots. Strictly that. It wasn't because I hated the army or because I didn't like what I was doing or because any of that. I just did not want to say goodbye to my kids. I know that plenty of women have done that. I just didn't want to. So when you realize that maybe salary isn't really the thing that you're chasing, maybe it's the other thing. So that's why I encourage people to really look at your non negotiable, to really realize that you're not stuck at a job when you first walk out. You have freedom to move about the cabin, and it's going to probably take you on average 3 jobs to finally get to the place that you need to go because you need to grow as an individual because you developed yourself in the military for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And now it's going to take you 5, 10, 15 years to figure out who you are outside of that uniform.
Yeah. And non-negotiables, it's a great point. I saw an interesting diagram. I'll try to drop it in the chat here at some point afterward, where the kind of antiquated way of looking at it was a pie cut right down the middle, title, salary. Those were the two variables for consideration when you're looking at a career or your next opportunity. When in reality, salary, title, those should be very small slivers. You need that work-life balance. You need strong culture, good mission that you can get behind. There's a lot more to it than just the title and the salary that you're going for. So great points. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off here. It's an interesting time and place to be, in in the military space. If you're looking for a career, you mentioned those non-negotiables for anybody that might be in the market looking for another opportunity. Put yourself out there. There's more jobs than there are job seekers right now. We have a really interesting job market at the moment. Employers are literally starving for talent. So you're kind of fishing with dynamite if you can do the little things, the little tactical things like getting your resume written for that opportunity, but do that soul searching and do that investing in your future and apply accordingly. But now is a really good time. The waters are warm to submit that application and see what kind of options you might have out there professionally speaking. Um, one last chance, if you want to throw a plug out there, Olivia, what's website, or how can people follow you? How can people stay in touch with what you've got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, so follow me there. I'm also on Facebook, and my handle on Instagram is RCR Princess. Kind of goes back to my racing days when I was in college, and in the new year, just a quick little plug. There will be something new coming. I do have a partner that I'm working with, and we will be launching a new podcast series, something that's more on the personal side about love lost in relationships, and the other side of how to grow through resiliency and mental health and all of that. So things that I've been asked to do, and so that is actually going to come in the new year, so stay tuned for that. That's all I'm going to say on that. But
You just keep adding to the pile. You just keep
exactly.
adding more hats to your repertoire. But Olivia, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us today. To everybody listening, again, Miss Olivia Nunn, and I am Chris Newsome with RecruitMilitary, and we are here to cover year 6 with all things, anything employment related. And until next time, I hope everybody has a great day and great rest of the week. So, thank you, Olivia, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks.